Hey everyone, welcome as we continue our study through the New Testament, looking at the New Testament church. And today we're going to be in Romans 13, verses 1 through 7, looking at respect for authority. And some of you probably aren't going to like this one. Sometimes this one can be a little hard for me. But it is something good, and it's something that we're supposed to do, and we're commanded to do from God. So we're going to read verses 1 through 7, and we'll look at it next. This is a little bit shorter one, but again, let's look through this real quick. It says, everyone must submit to governing authorities, for all authority comes from God, and those in positions of authority have been placed there by God. So anyone who rebels against authority is rebelling against God, or is rebelling against what God has instituted, and they will be punished. For the authorities do not strike fear in people who are doing right, but in those who are doing wrong. Would you like to live without fear of authorities? Do what is right, and they will honor you. The authorities are God's servants sent for your good. But if you're doing wrong, of course you should be afraid, for they have the power to punish you. They are God's servants sent for the very purpose of punishing those who do what is wrong. So you must submit to them, not only to avoid punishment, but also to keep a clear conscience. Pay your taxes too for these same reasons. For government workers need to be paid. They are serving God in what they do. Give to everyone what you owe them. Pay your taxes and government fees to those who collect them, and give respect and honor to those who are in authority. And so this one can be a little bit hard sometimes, especially the paying taxes and all that stuff. But just to clarify, this passage is addressing the responsibility of Christians to govern authorities, and that's it. Now, some of these general policies and rules do apply to other people in different types of authority, but this is government, like people in government governing authorities, and that kind of stuff. In this day, it would have been the emperor and those type of things. But anyways, right? We are to be subject to, which generally means to obey. Right? We are to obey the government because it has been ordained by God. God put them in authority. We got to set them there, and so we are to obey them. And so Paul's speaking here of the general principle of submission to government. And so the one thing we have to understand is there are other passages that show that God approves of disobeying government, but only when obedience to the government would mean disobeying God. We see that in Exodus, we see it in Kings, or First Kings, we see it I think in Esther, Daniel, in Matthew, Acts, and the Hebrews. I put all the notes in there. I put a lot of the verses in there, and so there are times where we have been called to do that, but only right when obedience to the government would mean disobedience to God. And so that's the thing. And so it's a general application here of as long as they're not asking you to do something that God's not asked you to do, then obey the government, right? Obey the laws of the land. Do what you're supposed to do. And so, I mean, we even know there was even times where God raised up leaders to rebel against the government and deliver people from evil rulers. And so, the general rule here. This is the general rule, not for all time, for everything, but it is a general rule to respect and to be subject or to obey those who are in charge. And so um and so it's kind of a good thing, right? Civil government in general is a blessing. So to have a civil government is from God, which we should be thankful, right? Because if not, without civil government, then there would be anarchy. And that is a very much, if anyone's witnessed anything close to what anarchy looks like, it's a horrible alternative, right? Yes, people in governing authority and governing in authoritative positions in government can be horrible people. They can be evil. They can do evil things, but um, anarchy is much more worse. And so we just need to make sure that we understand that. And so it says here, Paul says that governing authorities are God's servants and carry out His wrath on evildoers, and so and they do so for your good, right? And so that's part of the justice system that we see. America is good with that. Again, not all countries are, and but in the end, Paul's basically saying if you obey the authorities, again, as long as it doesn't go against God, then you're not going to have anything to worry about for the most part. And it says even though Christians must not take personal revenge, it is right for them to turn punishment over to the civil authorities who are responsible to punish evil. And we see that, right? We see that in our own government. That's what our justice system is for. I talked about that. And so we just need to make sure that you know, we obey the government. We don't break our laws, don't break the rules of the land, and do what we're asked to for the most part, like I said, unless it goes against God. And so Christians should obey civil authorities, not only to avoid God's wrath, right? Paul mentions that, um, but also because their conscience tells them that submitting to the government is right. And again, it may not always be something we agree with, right? Right at the end, right? This one here is like, right? It says Christians we must not refuse to pay our taxes. Paul says we pay your taxes, and so, and we can't just do it just because they think that some of the money is used unjustly or not in the right way. Because you got to remember when Paul was writing this in this time, right? The Roman Empire surely did not use it for all godly purposes. We know they weren't, right? They were using it to, and we're going to see it sometime to kill Christians, and so. But Paul's like, look, pay your taxes, pay your government fees, do what you're supposed to do, right? And again, like it doesn't always turn out right. We know that governments and all that stuff can be evil, can be bad, but for the general purposes, we need to respect those who are in authority, those who are in charge of our government, whether we like them or not, right? To the point they ask us to do something that's against God, and that's this thing. So basically, it said we are to what Paul writes here says we're to honor the leaders even if they are fully admirable. And so again, this one gonna be hard. And just to kind of recap, it's like Paul's telling us in a general sense to respect those who are authority, to submit to what they do, to pay our taxes, to basically to do what the government that's in charge, to do what they call you to do, obey the laws of the land, you know, pay the fees, pay the fines, pay the taxes, all that kind of stuff, and do it. And I think part of this more than anything, right, is in the end, if they see Christians behaving in a certain way, especially a positive way, that's a good thing for Christianity. It can have an influence. If Christians were rebelling against the government and trying to overthrow the government, something we see that Jesus never did. He could have tried to overthrow the government, though those in authority, and he didn't. Right? He paid taxes. He obeyed the laws of the land, and did what he was supposed to do. And so this is the same call that we're to do. It's the same thing that we're called to do. We may not like it, right? I don't like paying taxes. No, I don't know anyone who likes paying taxes. There's some laws that I think are stupid, right? There's some fees, there's some things like permits and stuff that I have to get. Yeah, we all have to do that I think's dumb and I shouldn't have to do it, but we need to do it. We need to follow the laws of the land. And so it's just more than anything, I think, being a good example, being a good steward, being a good person of setting the right example. And again, this applies up to the point where they ask you or the government asks you to do something that goes against God. And so that's the ultimate thing here. We don't need to read into this more than what's there, or less than what's there. And so it's a simple thing that Paul writes about, and to encourage them, especially them. These are the Romans, though they're in Rome, and so and this is a little bit more, even more important for them because they're in the seat of the Roman Empire, and so it was important for them to do what Paul's asking them to do and calling them to do. So again, like I said, this one's a little bit shorter. I hope it's clear. I hope it makes sense that we're to obey the those who are in charge, those who are in authority in our government, and it makes a good example. And so I hope this makes sense. I hope you learn from it. I know this is probably one of those you don't like. I know I don't like it sometimes, but it's what we're called to do, especially as God's servants and God's people. And so we need to obey the commands, all of them, even if we don't like them, and do what we're asked to do. So as always, appreciate everyone who takes time to watch. If you haven't subscribed to our channel, I encourage you to do that. But as always, like I say, I appreciate those who watch, and I hope you all have a wonderful day.